Hello and welcome to this very special webinar, Global Horizons on Money Control. I'm Ridu Bhandari. This is the platform that gives you all the knowledge about starting a new life on foreign shores. If you have global aspirations for a fresh start across borders and for securing the future of your kids in a foreign land, one way to do so is through investment immigration. Today, our focus is on the United States and its employment-based Fifth Preference Category or EB5 Immigrant Investor Program. To put it simply, you invest in the US economy, create at least 10 jobs for locals, and you can hope to get permanent residency there. But for whom is EB5 best suited? What's the waiting time for Indians? What are the mistakes that you should avoid while applying for EB5? What are the risks associated with it? And finally, what returns should you be expecting from it? To answer all of these questions and lots more, I'm joined today by Pankaj Joshi, Managing Director of NYSA Global, a renowned immigration consultant. Welcome to the show, Pankaj. First up, tell us for whom is EB5 best suited and what sort of opportunities does it unlock for an immigrant investor?
So the EB5 is an investment immigration program to the US. And it essentially gets the benefit of getting permanent residency or green cards for the investor and the family of the investor that are part of the application.
Right.
It is suitable for anybody that is looking at the US as a destination to settle themselves, to work, live, that want to not be part of the visa walls that are currently there in the United States.
Right.
Being an investment program, obviously, it is a higher threshold of investment and not everybody is able to do it.
Correct.
But for those that are able to do it, it offers the flexibility and the freedom to make America their home without having to face the challenges that you have to go through for the visas.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the requirements for qualifying for EB5. What sort of capital investments do you need to make? What sort of employment do you need to generate? As far as India is concerned, what are those requirements? And are they common for the whole world, or do you have specific requirements for Indians?
So the program has very specific requirements, and it is the same for across the world,
right,
for anyone coming from around the world. The program prescribes that the investment amount is $500,000 or $1 million if the project or your investment is located in what is called a targeted employment area, and if it is not in a targeted employment area. There are essentially two ways to do EB5. The first is the direct investment, where you can go and set up your own company or make your own direct investment, and that investment has to fulfill the job criteria requirement of the program.
Okay.
The second is what I call an indirect investment, or popularly called as the regional center program, wherein the investment is a pooled investment that goes into a project and is structured as a structured investment into a project.
Right.
And the project creates the jobs that are assigned or benefited to the investors into that project, or the EB5 investors into that project. The most popular route is the indirect investment or the regional center program. 98% of the EB5 that goes in through this route.
Right.
Primarily because it is a much easier and more passive way to do this, as opposed to setting up your own business and the challenges of setting up your own business.
Yeah.
The second is that this is agnostic. This makes you agnostic of the destination of the investment.
Right.
So if you're investing in a project in California today, you can choose to live in the Midwest or the other way around, right? Otherwise,
so you don't have to live anywhere close to the project.
Or, yeah, even in the state of that project.
Right.
So it gives you, it's independent of the state or location of the
Right.
project. So the advantage is that for families that are looking at doing this, A, they're not tied to the project. Their immigration process is not tied to something that they have to do. So as long as you've selected a project that is being done by a group that is going to complete it,
Right.
You are going to successfully navigate the immigration process.
Right.
So it is very paramount to choose where you invest the money, and ultimately the investment is into a specific project. It has nothing to do with the regional center or the mechanism of the investment. The underlying investment, where your money goes in, is the only thing that matters for your immigration process.
Right. Okay. So you spoke about the capital requirements, the investment requirements, and earlier this was at about $1 million, and starting November this year, this has been revised to $1.8 million, and from $500,000 in a targeted employment area to $900,000 in a targeted employment area. Given this increase in investment requirements, do you see the demand for EB5 in India going down? And currently, what is the demand like?
Well, India grew from, when we started doing EB5, there were about 30 odd applications of Indians by birth, right? US immigration goes by country of birth. So when we started back in 2013, there were 30. Last year, there were more than 1,000. So it has already grown from about 30 to more than 1,000.
1,000 families or 1,000 visas?
1,000 applications, so 1,000 families. So that's, more than about $500 million of Indian money has gone into the EB5 program. So the demand has always been there and will continue to be there. Obviously, the investment level at $500,000 and 900 will price it out for some people. But ultimately, there are, if the US is a destination that people want to be in, then for most of the applicants that we've had over the years, the ability to increase it, they will not be happy, but do they have the ability to do 900? Yes. Would they prefer to do 500? Yes. But having said that, there are two major changes that have been that are part of this new regulations that were published by the Department of Homeland Security. One is the investment amount increase. And the other and more important one is the change in the targeted employment area that qualifies for EB5. So under the program, it talked about that the investment should be in a targeted employment area or...
And these are typically areas that have very high unemployment rates.
Higher than the national average. So 1.5 times the national average, and the census tracts are defined by the states.
Right.
Now the DHS, now this program was being misused, okay, honestly. 90% of the EB5 money was going to gateway cities, which wasn't the original intent of the program, which actually wanted the money to go into parts of America that they wanted to direct the investment into. So what the developers were doing was they were gerrymandering. They were taking a targeted employment area and connecting other targeted, connecting census tracts and saying that because this project is in a location which is ultimately connected to targeted employment area, it qualifies as a targeted employment area. So the DHS has really come down hard on this, and under the new regulations, 99% of the existing EB5 projects will no longer qualify for EB5 investment, which obviously is going to have an immediate impact in the market because that will just take all these projects off the market.
Correct.
So there is a mad rush right now by the projects to raise money because come November 21st, there will be a transition as they try to move to the new regulations. And also they will not qualify even for the 900. Most of them will therefore have to take money at 1.8 million, which will definitely price them out of the market. So there is a big rush right now, which is a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing that people have a window.
So if you already invest in one of these projects before 21st of November, then you're with the old regulations.
Yeah, you're with the old regulation. But having said that, there is a big risk that we see with this window. That while these projects are trying to raise money, obviously there is not enough timeline for them to raise the complete EB5 that they wanted to raise. So when you're looking at a project right now, one of the key things that you should look at is how dependent is the project on this EB5 funding. And most people don't understand the risk of financing of a large project or any project to actually understand what that means, right? So when you look at the capital structure of any project, right, there is equity, there's debt, and there is anything in between which we popularly call mezzanine finance, right? Now, EB5 in 99% of the projects are mezzanine finance position, right? So there is a bank involved, which people believe wrongly that is a good thing because they think that the bank has funded it. But the banks also funded it because there's equity in mezzanine coming in. Now, if the mezzanine does not come in, then that has an impact on the debt coming in. And it has an impact on other equity coming in, right? So if one of the pieces falls short, then the whole project could get stalled, right? Just as much as, if bank financing dries up today, a lot of projects will have a trouble, right? So similar. So I think one of the biggest risks right now for people looking at doing EB5 is the dependency of the project on EB5 because honestly, between now and November 21st, is not enough runway for these projects to do the kind of EB5 that they started out to do. And do they really have the ability to manage the project or complete the project without EB5? Now, everyone will obviously turn around and say, yes, they do have the ability. But it is not, you know, there are many slips between the cup and the lip when it comes to project financing.
How does an investor really safeguard interests in cases like these? And is it then safer to invest in projects that perhaps have a higher equity stake coming from the developer himself?
Yes. So I think, first of all, look at a project where you're in first position mortgage, where you're a first position. The moment you're a second or a third, no matter how good that project is, you have a very high chance of being in trouble.
Right.
Okay. So look at projects where you are in a first position mortgage or a first position security holder. Even if there is a bank, try to do a project where you are parallel to a bank, not under a bank, right, in the capital structure, which are very hard to find. Okay. But there are a few that are out there like that. Look at what collaterals the developer is offering, right? What is the security that is standing behind it? A mezzanine is a very weak position to be in, and in most EB5 projects that are mezzanine financing, you will be in trouble.
Right.
You have to look at how dependent it is on EB5. So look at a project which has secured 100% financing without EB5 already, and is using EB5 for replacement of any of the other forms of capital that they have, right? So over the years, we've done many such projects where EB5 has come in only as replacement capital. So that's another very important way to approach this, right? Then look at where the project is right now, the developer, the ability of the developer, the background of the developer to actually finish projects.
On time.
On time. Look at the financial history of the developer. How many loans has he paid back? How many times have they done successful projects? How are those projects doing? Because EB5 is just another source of capital, right? So the track record of having repaid back different sources of capital over time, and the longer that track record is, right, is as important for an EB5 investor. Don't just look at the superficial part of it.
Right.
The second and most another very important part is that there is going to be a redeployment of your money. Because the EB5 timeline for Indians is going to be so much longer than what it is for non-Indians or non-Chinese and Vietnamese and Indians. The first project is going to pay back, okay? And you are looking at the first project only, not at the second project. A lot of EB5 and very large EB5 regional centers today have multiple cases going on against them where they have redeployed the money into a second project, and now that project is in trouble, right?
And then what happens to the investor's interests if that happens and if the project is in trouble? One, your capital is at risk. Two, is your immigration at risk too? Because if this project fails,
it is very
doesn't
possible
take off.
that your immigration can be deemed at risk as well. Yes. So, and your investment is at risk for sure, right? So again, depending on, because USCIS has not given clarity on redeployment yet. Okay. So redeployment, unfortunately, still remains unaddressed even in the new DHS regulation.
Right.
And for countries like, you know, where there's backlog, this is a very big issue. So you must look at what the redeployment strategy is, and the clarity is on redeployment, right? And so again, very important that you look at getting into a project with a developer that has the track record of, you know, fiscal responsibility towards all kinds of monies.
Yeah.
And this is why I keep saying that, again, the developer or the borrower is the ultimate, you know, thing that you need to evaluate, ultimate aspect that you need to evaluate while choosing an EB5 investment.
Right. Okay. Also, a pretty basic question for our viewers here on money control. While we are talking of investment, immigration and investing in the US, the EB5, is it primarily for real estate development only as far as regional centers are concerned, or are they looking at any other focus sectors?
It is mostly real estate. And the reason for that has been that, you know, EB5 requires the investment to go into a new project. A new project has to be a project that has, you know, that has a construction element to it so that the jobs get created that qualify for EB5. So typically these are real estate projects. There have been projects done in other areas. There are a few projects we've looked at that are in the manufacturing sector.
Right.
But, you know, when you're an EB5 investor and you're looking at making this investment, and, you know, real estate looks like a secure asset. So it's easier for people to understand that at least there is a real estate asset that's somewhere behind in that project, which has a value, as opposed to maybe maybe a services sector, IT services, any kind of services, or a food franchisee or a manufacturing project, wherein there is no real asset that is getting created, which is tangible enough for it to be of value if it comes down to a recovery process. So real estate definitely is majority of the EB5, and when I say majority, it's probably 99% of the EB5 out there.
Right. And for the few who take the direct investment route, are there specific business sectors, maybe futuristic businesses or tech-driven or innovation? Are any of these?
There is absolutely no specification of
the kind of
business. So you're open to do anything. We've known people that have done a direct investment in a trampoline park.
Wow. So as long as you're generating employment.
As long as you're generating employment. I mean, you could be a manufacturing plant in India looking at setting up a manufacturing plant in Indiana, and you could use that route into an EB5 for your family. But there is the direct job requirement is 10. So you have to create that employment, and your business has to sustain through the period of processing of your entire EB5, which for Indians is going to be 7 to 8 years from today.
And you have to maintain those minimum 10 jobs.
Yes, you have to maintain. So it's tough to do a direct one. But having said that, if you're doing a good size project, you can. We are working with families, business families in India that are looking at expanding into the United States, and they are exploring the idea of either using this investment for a migration route for their families.
Right. So you spoke of some of these Indian families you work with. Give us a sense of some of the success stories that you've seen over the last couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 case studies that you can share with us on what the idea they went with and what they've been able to achieve.
So the families that we worked with, right, I think the biggest success stories that have come out has been their ability or their families' abilities to realize their American dreams. So whether it is the parents of a child or a student of medicine in America who's now a doctor in the United States, or whether they're able to work on Wall Street, whether they're working with the top consulting companies, or the top tech companies, they have been able to get their dream jobs or their dream opportunities in the United States as a result of having the status in time to enable them to apply and secure those. So today what we see is that a lot of children that are obviously qualifying from the top schools, but when they go to an employer, the first question when you go in an application process, in a job, if you're a student even an on-campus placement, is do you need a visa? And if the answer is yes, well, a lot of doors are shut to you. And it's shutting in terms of both the jobs as such, also now in terms of the trainee programs that they have under the OPT visas. So this year, a lot of people have been telling me that when their child is, or when the kids are applying for even the training programs under the OPT, the first question is, do you need a visa? Because for a company that is looking at hiring someone, let's say it's a top tech company, that is looking at even the STEM OPT, and they know that, okay, I can have this guy for the next 2.5 years, they will go through a training program on that employee of theirs for 2.5 years. They'll expose them into certain things. They want to be able to recruit them. And at the end of that 2.5-year human resource investment, if they find that we are not able to retain this person, they're hesitant to make the investment in training the person. So even the trainee programs are getting shrunk for the Indian kids today. So yes, we have a lot of success stories where the kids are today working as doctors and Wall Street, they're working consultancies, etc., as a result of having the ability to do so.
Right. So the EB5 is a family visa program. Tell us who all are eligible, in terms of the applicant's family, whether it's the spouse, children, what are the age caps, and, in the Indian setup where we are looking at, a lot of people are still looking at joint families, perhaps also having senior citizens in the house. How does that really shape up? And, would you say then it suits only small nuclear families?
Yes and no. So the EB5 program the investment qualifies the investor plus spouse plus all unmarried children up till the age of 21.
Okay.
Now, 21 and up to the age of 21 is where the tricky part is. Okay. You have to obviously be below 21 for your name to be included in the application.
Right.
If you're above 21, you can't be part of the application.
In any form.
In any form, as part of the family, as a dependent.
Dependent.
Okay. Now, one is to be part of the application when you file for the EB5 visa, right? When you get approved, okay, and when you apply for the actual visa, right? So your petition is filed saying that I want to qualify as an investment immigrant.
Right.
They will qualify your petition, and that will basically approve you for a green card.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the approval of a green card to actually getting approval of the petition to getting the green card is step 2, which is where the trick is, because your child has to be 21 at that stage also. Okay. Now, the US regulation under what is called the Child Protection Act
Right.
freezes the age of the child at the time of filing of the petition. So let's say it takes you 2 years, okay, to get an approval. Your child has not aged, is still the same age as the time, the age at which the petition was filed.
Okay.
Once the petition is approved, the child's age starts to move forward. So before that moving forward, you have to apply for the green card or the visa number
Right.
and pay the fee bill before the child turns 21. Now, this is where the trick is for Indians, right? Because we have a backlog for Indians under the EB5 category,
Yeah.
which is going to take at least a 5 to 7 year period for an applicant today to have a visa number available for their application,
Yeah.
right? So that means you file today, you will get approved in 2 years, but you probably have to wait for 3 to 5 years for that visa number. What that means is that
So
2 years
about
from now, your
7
child's
years.
age has started to tick, 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 right?
Right.
So if you take 3 to 5 years as the waiting time after approval
Yeah.
for the green card number, and you subtract that from 21, 18 is almost out, and 16 is probably safe,
Yeah.
right? So for anyone that have children that are 16 and above today, it is a risky thing to apply and expect the child to get included as a dependent. Now, it may happen, it may not happen. So it's a risky part. Someone whose child is below 15 is relatively safe in doing this, okay?
So it's better off to apply the children
Independently,
as independent separate applicants.
Yes, if they are 18 and above, yes. Now, unfortunately, what has happened in India is that while this was announced in 2018, it was only effected in 2019. Okay, so in April of 2018, it was announced by the National Visa Service that based on the number of applications already in the system and therefore the number of visas that they estimate them to take up, by the third quarter of 2019, they will expect India to also be in the backlogged country category. Now, unfortunately what has happened is that for a lot of applicants that came in after April 2018, they have made this investment without factoring in the backlog effect. So there are many families today that are facing this issue where they have applied with a 20-year-old or a 19-year-old in 2018 and are likely to see their children age out before the visa becomes current. And while the market was aware of it, it is very unfortunate that this has not been communicated in the market by the various players that are operating in it. And now, unfortunately, in the last few months, I have met many families because when visa backlog was affected, suddenly people realize what's going on. So we meet a lot of people that are EB5 prospects, and they tell us about an experience going on with their relative or their friends or their family, or even have been approached by people who are investors into this, and now who are realistically stuck in this. And it's a really sad situation that people have not informed the market about something that was in existence, right? So in 2018, in January, we launched a project which had the benefit of being expedited approved. And what that gave us was the ability that people could beat the backlog before
How do you
it
do
hit.
that?
Well, there is a project which had an expedited, so instead of 2 years, the approvals were coming in faster. And if you could apply and complete that visa number application, you were effectively in before the backlog came.
Right.
So many families that availed of that are sitting in the US or have that status today, but the hundreds of people that went in around that time are now stuck. And well, it is what it is. So I think it's very important, and that the market should understand what the nuances of an immigration process are before taking this decision.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, this information is not given by the various people that come and meet people in India. And it's a sales tactic or whatever it is. I mean, we like to tell the ugly truth because sometimes it's better to tell the truth than
Absolutely.
have sleepless night later or not picking up phones and things like that. But having said that, so today we know that the EB5 program for an Indian family is going to be a 7 to 8 year process between applying, getting the green card, and then filing for the fulfillment of condition, which is 21 months after getting that first green card.
Right.
So we want to bring projects that offer the security and the visibility and the transparency for people to where their money is truly secure. One of the things, for example, that people don't take into context is that in the United States there is no requirement for a private company to disclose their financial information.
Okay.
Right? I mean, we've seen that, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you know that.
But doesn't that allow a lot of unlawful activity from India to get transported that side? I mean, how do you really, what sort of a scrutiny will you be put through by the Department of Homeland Security?
Sorry, I'm talking about the other side. I'm talking about the project side. Okay, we can talk about the investment and the investor documents, which are very scrutinized by the United States Immigration Services. They are very, very good at finding and sieving through the documentation.
Right.
Over the years, we've seen, I mean, I have worked on, almost 100 files for Indian sources of funds, etc., and they are very stringent. But if you are transparent and if your documents are in order, it's also a very straightforward process. It is about putting your paperwork together properly and explaining it to someone. And if your paperwork is in order, there is no problem in getting it. Right? We've never had an issue.
Right.
I'm talking about the project visibility side. Right?
Okay.
When you make this investment, your money has gone to a private party in America.
Right.
Both the regional center and the project are essentially private entities.
Right.
There is no disclosure requirement of their financial data. So you are dependent on information that they provide.
Correct.
Right? When they provide it.
Yeah.
So it's not public information, right? Which puts you in an inherently risk position because you never know what is actually going on in the background until it has hit.
So how do you really safeguard your interests against that? Let me take a minute to also invite our viewers of Money Control to share queries with us. We have Pankaj of NYSA Global joining us here today. So globalhorizons@nw18.com is the email ID that you can write to if you have an EB5 query. Go ahead, and Pankaj is here to answer your questions. So feel free, write to us at globalhorizons@nw18.com. Yes.
Yes. So we were talking about the private companies, right?
Yes.
So because you're putting money into a private company, into a MES structure where there is a bank and other things, there is a very large risk that you're running, right? Because the information will not be available to you unless it is provided by someone.
Yeah.
Okay. There are very few projects in the US that are part of organizations that are publicly listed. Which therefore have large compliance requirements. This year we introduced a project which is by a financial group based out of New York. It's a very large financial institution and conglomerate. They are listed on NASDAQ.
Right.
And as a result, the EB5 loan is part of their quarterly filings. So there is a lot of structures in place which they have to, A, because they are anyway listed on the NASDAQ, and B, being a financial institution as a parent, they are obviously under the highest regulations that exist, right?
Correct.
So the the EB5 loan, which is a very, very, very small part of their actual overall balance sheet and the overall organization, is automatically under SEC regulations, which doesn't exist in EB5 in any other project that we've come across.
Right.
The reason we introduced this project was because of the strength of this transparency, then the strength of the actual compliances that need to be followed.
Right.
Because there is a very large risk associated with not following it, right? We all know what happens to an institution that does not follow compliances and is listed in the markets, whether it's India or anywhere else in the world. What happens to an organization that doesn't do it, right? So we've introduced such a project in India, and the reason we introduced it this year was because we know it's going to be an 8-10 year cycle for Indians. We want to have an investment where we can have a nice sleep at night, thinking that our investors' money is in a place where they can sleep well at night. So there are ways to do this, right? And there is and if you look at this project and what it is and who's standing behind it, these are decades of track records of multiple types of financing being paid back and multiple types of financing going on, very huge equity bases in place, etc. So there is a huge strength behind the actual project.
Right.
And they are not dependent on EB5. EB5 is the replacement capital that they are using.
Right. So also let's talk a little bit about the country cap on EB5 visas. What is that like for India? And traditionally we've had a lot of Chinese people vying for these visas. As far as India is concerned, what's the demand like and what's the country cap like? How competitive is it and how good are your chances of actually getting one?
So the Chinese flooded the EB5 market in 2014, 15, 16. There were about 14,000 applications coming in, 10 to 15,000 applications coming in every year. Okay. Now the visa categories in America, the green card categories, have what is called a country cap. And across the board, that country cap is 7%. What that means is that not more than 7% of the visas can be given to people of a particular country. And people of a particular country means the birth of the country, not the passport.
Right.
So if you're an Indian born, you can't just take up another country's passport and then say that I'm from that country.
That country, right.
Now, what that does is that it gives only 700 visas to Indians. Now, understand
so that would roughly be like 200 odd families.
Correct. Because each application is more than one visa, that roughly translates to about 250, 275 applications. Now, having said that, with the huge rush of EB5 applicants that have come in, especially in 2000 and late 2017, 2018 and 2019, there is suddenly a build-up of Indians, right? Which will take years to clear up because it's 700 at a time. Now, another aspect that people, the other thing that people are misinformed in the market is that just because backlog this year, they will start again on 1st of October.
Right.
They will not start again on 1st of October. They will open it by a calendar date, in a historic date in October 2018, in October 2019. That date is going to be probably the fall of somewhere in 2017. When India went into backlog in July, the date was 1st of May 2017. So only if you're an applicant on or before 1st of May 2017 could you apply for the visa. And you're approved, obviously, you can apply. Anyone after that has to wait. Now that date is going to move slowly forward as they issue the visa. So when the visa year starts on 1st of October, they will give out 700 visas through the visa year. And again, at some point in the next visa year, which is 1st of October 19 to 30th September 2020, they would have used up 700 and it'll go backlog. That date then will go back to whatever the Chinese date is. Okay, because the way the visa system works is that the leftovers visas of each year, right? Assume that India, China, Vietnam take up their 700.
Right.
Rest of the world takes up another 3,000. That's only 5,000 visas out of 10. 5,000 are left over. They go back into a pool which goes back and gets allocated by the total priority date line, right? The original line, which is full of Chinese.
But these leftover 5,000 cannot be used by countries that have already used
No, they go back into a common pool and that then gives the visas according to the date of applications that are filed. So right now, the only beneficiaries are the Chinese. But that'll come next year. So the Chinese get more than 700, but they get the leftovers of each year above their 700.
Right.
But the Indians are so far back in that line that it's going to take us 6-7 years to start to get that. You know.
So what is the waiting line preparation that investors should be doing?
5 to 7 years to have the green card status in America.
And though in those 5 to 7 years, business environments change, your capital availability changes, anything can really happen in 7 years, So
Yes.
what are the sort of risk mitigation strategies that any investor should be putting in place? Maybe top 3 if you can come up with.
The track record, because if the developer has a long track record, then they have, and a successful long track record, they have obviously gone through business cycles and they are prepared for business cycles. Okay. So, because business cycles will happen. The position that you are in the capital structure, how protected are you? How soon or how late will you get wiped out if it comes down to it, right? So, if there is a sale, and the bank has a majority position, you are likely to be just lost. Right? And the third is where the project is and the ability of the project to sustain itself with its own money or other sources of capital if there is a slowdown. So it is about the history of the developer to weather storms. It is about where you are in terms of the position that you hold in terms of the capital structure. And the ability of the business itself to weather the storm. If you're a hotel and it comes down to 40% occupancy, what happens to it? Right? What happens to its ability to service interest? What happens to its ability to service itself, right? To run itself? Most of your commercial real estate, rental real estate projects, right? What happens if occupancy comes down to 40%, right? You have to play out those scenarios and see how that affects, right? Today, in Indian context, when you take it, real estate developers are in trouble because of their ability to service their debt. You have to have at least the revenue to service the debt, right? And if sales fall below a certain level and your debt is high, you will start to falter on servicing of debt. So you have to vary, you have to play in these variables into looking at projects. Now, most EB5 investors don't understand it and they don't look into it, but these are important factors for you to consider while evaluating EB5.
Right. Right. And since you deal with clients on a daily basis, are there also examples of what not to do that you want to share with our audience here on Money Control? Maybe examples of where people did not put in their due diligence and, suffered because of that, or had, perhaps situations where they had to really pack up their bags and come back to India?
Timing, there is a time risk of EB5. So when you say it's 5 to 7 years today, what if it becomes 7 to 8 years? This has to be done in advance. Don't do it too close to when you need it. I mean, 5 to 7 years already very far away from being close. But what that means is that if you are looking at the US as a destination, factor in the lead time to getting that status. Okay, so I think one of the biggest things that we've seen is that people have done it too late, and it's not their fault. It came into India too late. We are now working with approaching a lot of families that have children in schools, primarily because
so that they can prepare for higher education.
Yes, I mean, honestly, if I'll give you my personal example, if I put my 3-year daughter into an IB school today or next year when I have to apply, I've already pre-decided she's going abroad. Right? So I know I have 14 years to figure out where to settle her, but I have already pre-decided that I am going to put her into an education system which will not qualify for Indian universities. So I know I'm sending her abroad. So most of the families that are looking at sending their children abroad know so very early in life. Right? So it is very important for them to start to plan this very early so that A, it's a family application.
Correct.
B, it is available in time for them to, when they actually need it. So one of the biggest things we've seen is when it has been done too late. And USCIS can take any amount of time to process an application, right? We say it's 18 to 24 months, but what if it becomes 30? What if it becomes 12? So you can't factor in this, right? So you have to give it adequate time.
Right.
The second thing where I think people have really made mistakes is they haven't really taken an informed decision about the EB5 investments that they have made. There have been failures. There are Indian investors that are stuck today in projects that are failed. We have worked with such families because they've had to do a second EB5.
Yeah.
The same players that they invested in are still raising money in the market. So if you're doing due diligence and you find that the regional center has had issues in the past, how do you deal with them? So the due diligence is very important. And also I think the most important factor, don't listen to what you want to hear, right? A lot of, this is a buyer syndrome, right? You want to obviously be sold what you want to buy, right? So if people are telling you stuff, don't just buy it at face value. Research it, learn it, ask the questions. Don't just look at discounts that people are giving. Don't look at, some kind of freebie that they're offering or a little higher return on your investment. Understand why. Understand that someone who's taking $500,000 from you today is going to have your money for the next 8 to 10 years, and you don't have a control over it, right? So please be very wary of people when they approach you with EB5 because they're taking your money for 10 years, and there's a lot of risk to it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. So also, what checks and balances should an aspiring investor put in place while choosing the right kind of immigration consultant and maybe immigration lawyers? How do you really choose? Because a lot of these options are available in the market today, and
again,
it's tough to
choosing a lawyer, is key. You have to work with law firms and lawyers that have a significant understanding of EB5 and the documentation, because the EB5 investment is pretty much commoditized, right? In the sense that the project's pre-qualified for EB5 or is definitely structured to qualify for EB5, right? So any good quality developer today or that has an EB5 project out there, the documentations will comply to EB5 regulations, right? So the only thing that matters thereafter for your qualification is your qualification, which has to do with your documentation and the sources of funds documents. And you have to work with lawyers that understand not only what documents are required, but also how to present it to USCIS. Right now, USCIS, think about it like this. There is an adjudicator who has absolutely no idea who you are, right? Who's just looking at a document set and has to, based on reading that document set, take a decision whether you are, whether your sources of funds are qualified or clean or not, right? And does not have the benefit of being an Indian accounting person, does not have but having said that, they understand it. Okay? They're very well trained. But they don't know you, right? So they have to take that. So if if your document is explained properly, annexed properly, the sets are put together properly, it will be easier for him or her to follow it and take an early adjudication. If you just send them documents and you expect them to find it, it doesn't help, right? And the law firms that have been doing this for years and years, they understand how to create the documentation, presentation and flow so that it is easier for the adjudicator, or not easier, so that it is easier for them to read through it, right? I mean, if I just give you a set of documents which have mixed bank statements and income tax return, you won't know how to
make sense of it.
You have to number them, right?
Right. And it's important to have the right kind of experts who really do all of that for you.
And write the covering explanation and explaining the source of funds, path of funds. So,
Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about the repayment of EB5 investments plus returns plus what is it that EB5, what should you expect out of it. But at this point in time, let me also invite viewer queries. If you're watching this special webinar on moneycontrol.com, do write in to us at globalhorizons@nw18.com if you have any queries related to investment immigration, particularly to the EB5 investment immigration program in the US. Feel free to write into us and we'll take your queries here. Let's talk a little bit about the expectations an investor should have while applying for an EB5 visa. Should it be just to get a green card, or can you expect anything on your investment as well?
So the typical EB5, the return on investment is almost negligible. Right? Again, there are EB5 projects that are trying to offer a higher rate of return, right? But a rate of return, just like any other business, risk and return, the lower the risk, the lower the return, right? So if you look at, so this is another important way to people to evaluate projects, right? what is the EB5 money paying to the investor, and what is it paying to the regional center that is further investing the money into the project? What's the spread? Typically, that spread is 5 to 6%. Where is that money in terms of the capital stack of the project, right? If it is first position loan to the project, okay, then it is basically at parallel to a US bank lending money. If you're a good quality borrower, that loan should come in at about 5 to 6%, right? Which is what EB5 money, then therefore to a developer, if EB5 is not significantly cheaper than 5 or 6% that they get from a bank,
Right.
then why would they take it? Isn't it easier to go to a bank, take the money, have it available in large chunks as opposed to a program where it comes in $500,000 at a time, right? If you're trying to raise $50 million of EB5, that's 100 checks of 500,000, right? Which obviously is going to come over time, and you don't know whether it'll come on Monday or whether it'll come in September or
Correct.
right. So why that, right? Second, if you're not first position and you are anywhere in the mezz position, okay, if the equity is 20% or less,
Yeah.
you are at a position where the money otherwise would come in at about 15 to 18%,
Okay.
right? So as an EB5 investor, you are in the same risk position that someone in the US would have given money at 18% for. And you are giving it at 0.25% or 0.5 or 3. So can you so just imagine what your
So
risk.
that's the cost you're paying for your green card.
No, that's the risk
That
that
you're
you
taking.
have on that investment. Because the guy who would have given money at 18% would not have taken this position without additional security and collateral and really tied themselves up to protect themselves against a bank takeover, right? You don't have that protection. So you are at a position of an 18% risk taker without the coverage of an 18% risk taker. So you're in a really bad position. Okay.
So basically, don't have expectations of any kind of returns. And
No. Therefore, what I'm saying is very important to look at the capital structure and where it is. If the project's paying you 3% or 5%, how is it able to pay you 5%? Why is it taking EB5 money and against what position? Right? So if it's taking your money with otherwise would cost them 18%, they're happy to pay you more.
yeah.
Because it's still less than 18. But are you getting that protection? No. You're not getting that protection. So it's a very big risk, right? If you're in first position and you're against a bank position, then you're fairly safe because you are a first position on the asset, right? So don't look for return on investment. Look at return of investment,
Right. Right.
okay? Because this is not an investment you control. So look for a safe structure where you are first position mortgage and your capital is protected with a borrower that has a long and distinguished track record of performance and repayment and adequate capital to match up the shortfall in EB5,
Right. Right.
right?
Okay. Okay. And so real estate is all about location, location, and location. So as far as investing in the right states is concerned, how do you really choose where in the US your investment should be? Because there are a number of EB5 projects happening all around the United States of America. So as an investor, how important is location, and should you be concerned about that at all?
Yes and no. Obviously, location is important. I mean, the project's location is important for the project to succeed, right? So if you go and start to build a luxury condominium in
a rural side of
area
America.
somewhere, and there's going to be no buyer for it, there's going to be no buyer for it. But having said that, if you're in a rural area project, which makes sense in that rural area, you will make money, and you're better off at times than a gateway city project, right? We've done rural area projects. We've done 2 projects that are in absolute unheard of places.
And
both
what
have done
are
successfully.
these projects?
We did a hotel and marina project
Okay.
in a little place on Lake Michigan, 90 miles south of Chicago.
Right.
Hotels built. We go stay in it every year. It's doing very well. This was a project back in 2014.
Okay.
We had 38 investors in it. Project's built. I mean, it's a hotel. It's doing very well. We've done a project which was in North Carolina, which is built and done very well.
Right.
Jobs are created, projects running successfully, it's making money, it will have the ability to repay back. So it doesn't matter that it's in a rural or a lesser known location, as long as the project is built and is doing what it's supposed to do.
Right.
Now, having said that, the real estate in downtown Manhattan is as risky as North Carolina,
Anywhere else, yeah.
right? Because, and again, that's where it comes into what the project is and where do you stand, right? What happens when the occupancy becomes 40%,
Right.
right? That's the kind of things you have to look at, right? I mean, we've seen in Indian context, right, a luxury hotel chain which with a marquee brand name,
Yeah.
which has gone into ARC, not because the hotels were doing badly, just because the capital structure
Right.
was not not correctly structured,
Correct.
right? And the hotels are beautiful properties around India, and it's gone into an ARC. The hotels are still running,
Yeah.
right? But they lost the project, right? Or the hotels. So that is where your calculation as an investor needs to come in.
Right.
What happens if the occupancy falls? What happens if the project doesn't do as well? What happens if it's not 85% occupancy? Right?
Yeah.
A lot of EB5 projects in major cities are built on 80% occupancy, which we know is hard. It looks great.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, any company looks at 100% sales, and obviously all the results look great. But
Obviously.
major Indian companies are having trouble today when the sales have fallen below a certain
Correct, correct.
percentage, and that will happen.
Correct. Okay, let's also spend a little bit of time on comparing investment immigration in the US with a couple of other countries.
Sure.
So apart from EB5, you
Yeah.
also have other similar programs, say
Yeah.
in Ireland, in Canada, in a couple of other nations.
Yes.
So, what is the demand like for those? And if you put aside your great American dream, which are the other countries that you should be looking at?
So interesting you bring that up, right? So in 2018, we started to do dipsticks in the Indian market on what demand is like for other countries. Now we've seen this in China, we've seen this in Southeast Asia that there is demand for other countries.
Yeah.
So we did dipstick, and we've started to get really good demand for non-American opportunities. I think the US opportunity has a very defined market.
Right.
Either it is yes or a no for America. If it's a yes for America, it's almost at any cost, right? We've seen, that people want to go, they want to be in America, it is America only.
Yeah.
It's a market which is mostly professionals that are very well educated in India or have done foreign education in their time,
Yeah.
are in top job positions or corporate and companies in India, or professionals, architects, doctors, lawyers,
Yeah.
and they are looking at this as a destination for their children to settle. They are not necessarily at all interested to go right now. Maybe when they're looking at retiring and their children are there, they want to go, they hope to have, Indian parents, right?
Yeah.
They want to go and spend time with the grandchildren ultimately. But they're not for them right now. Now there are a few there are people, there is a percentage of EB5 applications where the applicants are moving themselves.
Right.
Either it's because they're younger and their children are very small and they're actually going, or it is something that they want to do. The family actually wants
Right.
to move as well. The non-EB5, the non-US demand is coming from mostly the SME sectors and recently out of professionals that are not interested in the US.
Right.
We are meeting people that have actually come back from the US,
Yeah.
okay, and did not want to stay in America and want to be in Europe. And Europe offers a great opportunity for people right now. We have programs that are getting traction in Portugal.
Right.
We have programs that are getting demand for in Cyprus. We are introducing a couple of other European products. We have introduced Ireland.
Right.
Some of these investment amounts are lower than EB5, some are higher. So Ireland, which is the most highest level, is at €1 million.
Right.
But Ireland is a destination that is attractive for a very ultra HNI kind of a client company, because of the tax efficiencies that Ireland offers, right?
Right.
Today, Dublin, Ireland is where a lot of your major tech companies, US tech companies, are globally headquartered and
Yeah.
profit centered out of. And the reason is that it offers a tax efficiency,
Right.
And it is not a tax haven country, it's a tax efficient country.
Yeah.
And of late, especially after Brexit, there is a huge movement of companies that are setting up offices in Dublin. So when I was in Dublin this summer, I walked down the tech district, and Google has new buildings after buildings that they are setting up.
Right.
You know, Facebook has a very large office there. They have
Correct,
thousands of people, and they don't have employees.
Right.
So it
So
is an
it's-
attractive place.
So lots of attractive places out there, and thank you so much for being with us today,
Sure.
Pankaj, and
Thank you
really
so much.
clarifying everything, all the
Yes.
queries around
we hope that
EB5.
Global Horizon becomes a platform for
Yes.
people that are pursuing the global aspirations.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you so
And
much.
thank you for clearing all those queries and myths around EB5. And well, that's a wrap of this special webinar. I hope we've answered all your queries related to the great American dream, and investment immigration is certainly one way that you can go about giving your dreams the wings of touching global horizons. Thank you so much for joining us today. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pankaj.